Addison Walker walked into the familiar office on a Tuesday morning, completely unaware that it would be the last time she set foot in the place she had devoted herself to for 6 years. She was called in to meet with her boss, Victoria, at 9 a.m. The atmosphere in the room was eerily quiet. In front of her stood a heavy mahogany desk, and behind it, the cold, piercing gaze of the woman who had once praised her as the pride of the company. But today, the only thing reflected on that face was disappointment disguised as authority. "This is an act of disloyalty," Victoria said flatly. On the desk sat a neatly printed copy of an email evidence that Addison had attended an interview at North Bay Solutions Harbor Point's biggest client. The interview had taken place after Addison requested a half day off, citing a dental appointment. But Victoria didn't give her a chance to explain. No discussion, no consideration of circumstances. Just a swift sentence employee badge revoked. Email access terminated, and a security officer would escort her to collect her belongings. Sitting across from the woman who had once been her mentor and superior, Addison tried to remain calm. Inside her was a mix of anger, disappointment, and relief. 3 years ago, she had started sensing that something was off. Every time she brought up a raise with evidence, performance metrics, and concrete results, she was turned down due to budget constraints. Meanwhile, Victoria boasted record profits during company-wide meetings and drove a shiny new SUV into the lot. Each morning, Addison had once believed that if she kept working hard, kept pushing forward, her time for recognition would come. But after 3 years of waiting, all she received was suspicion and a humiliating end. Addison walked out of the office carrying a box with a few personal items, some family photos, a couple of potted plants she had cared for like she had once nurtured the company's PR campaigns. No tears, no outburst, only composure, the strongest weapon of someone who knows their own worth. She gave a soft smile to the colleagues watching her go, a silent farewell that needed no words. What Victoria didn't know, however, was that at that very moment, Addison's phone was vibrating with a message from David Klein, CEO of North Bay Solutions. "Addison, can we move our final discussion up to 2 p.m. today?" A perfectly timed invitation from the very person who trusted Addison more than anyone else in Harbor Point's client network, fired perhaps, but she had never failed. Because while Victoria thought she had eliminated a threat, what she actually did was let go of the company's most valuable asset and handed it straight to a competitor. What was meant as a punishment had accidentally opened a much bigger door for a woman who had spent far too long stuck in the shadows of injustice. And this was only the beginning. That afternoon, as the sun rose behind the high-rises of downtown Spokane, Addison walked into the headquarters of North Bay Solutions, a bright, modern space that stood in stark contrast to the gloomy tones of Harbor Point. The difference wasn't just in architecture, but in the atmosphere here. People greeted each other with trust in their eyes, not the suspicion or veiled envy hidden behind polite smiles. And on the top floor inside David Klein's office, a new door had truly opened for Addison. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," David said, shaking her hand with genuine sincerity. No pretense, no hidden agenda. The conversation didn't start with typical interview questions, but with an honest admission. "We had already been considering bringing you on board. The fact that you were let go today just sped things up." Addison was speechless. It turned out that the trusted working relationship she'd built with North Bay over the past 3 years wasn't just measured by numbers and results, but by quiet respect. David shared that among the leadership team, Harbor Point had often been criticized for being unprofessional and slow, except in the projects led by Addison. That convinced him not only that she was the right person, but that now was the right time. She didn't interrupt. She just sat there listening, letting David's words soothe the pain of that morning. Like a quiet confirmation, she wasn't wrong to walk away. "We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Client Strategy," David said, gently sliding a folder toward her. Addison looked down and was nearly stunned to see the proposed salary was nearly double what she had once pleaded for at Harbor Point. "This is market rate for someone with your talent and experience." He added a formal acknowledgement of her worth. At that moment, Addison was at a loss for words. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove Victoria wrong. Reality was speaking for her that a person's value cannot be erased by a superior's nod. And sometimes losing an old, worn out place is how we finally find where we truly belong. That evening, Addison placed the contract on her kitchen counter. Her eyes lingered on the bold title Director of Client Strategy, Addison Walker, and she couldn't help but smile. Messages from old colleagues kept coming in telling her Harbor Point was in chaos, that Victoria had called an emergency meeting, that everyone was updating their resumes. But Addison didn't feel smug. She didn't need to, because real victory doesn't come from watching others fall, but from rising again stronger than ever. When her phone rang, Addison picked up. A calm, professional female voice came through. "Hello, Ms. Walker. This is Elaine Winters, a member of Harbor Point's board of directors." Addison raised an eyebrow. The board never got involved in mid-level personnel matters. "This call wasn't a small deal. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning. It seems Victoria may have acted a bit hastily today. An invitation to meet after everything." Now Addison understood one thing clearly. Her silence was the loudest answer of all. She had been seen, heard, empowered, and to Addison, that was the real triumph. Not in striking back, but in simply moving forward on her own terms. The next morning, Addison once again walked through the main lobby of Harbor Point Communications, only this time not as an employee, but as a guest. Her confident posture, a simple yet elegant navy suit, and a steady gaze made the front desk momentarily pause. Jessica, the young receptionist who had quietly messaged Addison after her termination, spotted her and lowered her voice. "You were the best person here." "Everyone knows that," Addison smiled. That small comment felt like a healing balm. She wasn't there to stir up conflict, nor to reclaim anything. She came to close a chapter with grace and composure. In the upstairs conference room, Elaine Winters, a sharp-eyed woman with neatly styled silver hair, was already waiting. There was no Victoria, no finger-pointing. Just two women, two generations facing each other, with a rare kind of respect in an otherwise cold and cutthroat environment. "I've reviewed your file." Elaine began placing a thin folder on the table. 6 years of continuous growth, 3 formal raise requests, all denied without a documented reason, and there is no internal policy that prohibits employees from interviewing elsewhere. Addison said nothing. She let the silence speak for itself like an unspoken but sharp indictment. "We'd like to offer you a position to return," Elaine said, her tone calm yet clear. "With the salary adjustment you last proposed, plus an additional 10% and the title of Senior Director of Strategic Accounts." For a brief moment, Addison was stunned. This was the offer she had dreamed of, hoped for over the past 3 years. But now, all she felt was that it had come too late. "I truly appreciate the offer," Addison replied, her gaze unwavering. "But I've signed with another company. I start this coming Monday." Elaine nodded, though a trace of regret flickered across her face. "We understand North Bay Solutions is involved. And yes, Victoria was concerned they might withdraw after your departure." And there it was, the truth. The invitation to return wasn't so much about missing Addison, as it was about fearing the loss of North Bay, a client that accounted for nearly 30% of their annual revenue. "What Harbor Point needs to learn," Addison replied, her voice low but firm, "is not how to hold on to someone after they're gone, but how to see their value while they're still here." Elaine paused, then gave a soft nod. A fair lesson. Addison stood shaking hands with a woman who now represented a system that once failed her. But as she walked out of that building for the last time, she carried no box, no bitterness. Instead, she held something far more valuable: agency, a voice, and her self-respect. This meeting wasn't about reclaiming an old position. It was Addison's way of making one thing clear: she would not return to a place that only saw her worth once she was gone. And that lesson wasn't just for Harbor Point. It was for every workplace that ever squandered talent, thinking silence meant loyalty. This time, Addison was the one who closed the door, and she knew without a doubt that the one opening ahead was far bigger. Monday morning, as the week's first sunlight shimmered across the glassy high rises of downtown Spokane, Addison walked into her new office with an entirely different mindset. No longer was she someone waiting to be recognized. She was now a trusted leader, empowered and respected. The nameplate on her door read, Addison Walker, Director of Client Strategy, a quiet yet powerful reminder of the journey she had fought, through not one paved in red carpet, but one defined by grit and determination. David Klein met her in the hallway, greeting her with a warm smile and a small welcome gift basket. We're really looking forward to having you shape the future of North Bay's marketing, he said. And Addison knew this time she wasn't here to prove her worth. She was here to use it. The morning began with her first meeting with her new team, 5 seasoned marketing professionals, all waiting for someone capable to lead them. Addison didn't need to posture or assert dominance. She simply shared her story with honesty and set the tone for a culture of transparency, respect, and shared growth. No longer caught in the middle between management and clients, Addison was finally free to be the leader who inspires. At the end of the meeting, David invited her to a surprise session with the executive board. There's something we need to decide on quickly, he said, and we want your voice in the room. In an elegant but understated boardroom, North Bay's senior executives were deep in discussion should they renew the contract with Harbor Point Communications. The deal was set to expire in a month, and Addison, now director of client strategy, was the one who knew both sides of the relationship best. She could have easily recommended they walk away, a simple nod from her, and Harbor Point, the company that had once coldly fired her, would lose its biggest revenue stream of the year. But Addison wasn't here for revenge. She was here to build. I think we should evaluate them as we would any other partner, she said carefully. They have talent, but the issue is inconsistency, especially in account management. If we're to continue, we need to ensure there's a truly capable lead in place, not just someone installed to save face. The board members nodded. No one said Victoria's name, but the glances around the room made it clear everyone understood. Addison wasn't asking for a chance to strike back. She chose to rise above. Her professionalism earned the board's respect, and that spoke louder than anything else she had won. Not by crushing her opponents, but by letting their weaknesses reveal themselves. A few days later, when North Bay officially announced the termination of the contract with Harbor Point and the onboarding of a new agency with Addison overseeing the entire transition, she didn't feel triumphant, just relieved, as if a long, unfinished chapter had finally been closed. That afternoon, she received a message from Jessica, the former receptionist. The office is in chaos now. Victoria lost it, and the other managers are looking to jump ship. But don't worry, everyone here still remembers and appreciates you. Karma's fast. Addison read it and simply smiled. Not because karma had arrived early, but because she had truly stepped out of the shadows into the light she created for herself. And that light, needing no permission, was more than strong enough to carve her own path forward. A week after officially starting her job at North Bay Solutions, Addison stood by the window on the 30th floor, gazing at the city of Spokane bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. On her desk was a gently steaming cup of tea, and beside it the strategic quarterly plan, the very one she was now in charge of approving. Just days ago, she had been dismissed from her previous job under the accusation of lack of loyalty. Now she was leading client strategy for one of the city's most dynamic companies. Addison didn't need to retell the old story to anyone. Through her calm demeanor, thoughtful leadership, and the quality of her work, she had rewritten it. No longer the woman who got fired, but the woman who was set free. Harbor Point losing a contract that accounted for 30% of its revenue wasn't the end of anyone's story. It was proof of a simple truth. There's always a price for undervaluing talent. And when a woman knows her worth, nothing can hold her back in a place that no longer fits. In the days that followed, Addison gradually settled into her new role. She built systems shaped a team culture based on transparency and collaboration. There was no office politics, no backstabbing. Here, people worked toward shared goal, and Addison was the one who kept that fire burning. What she didn't expect was that her journey would inspire others. Quiet messages from former colleagues began to appear. You made me brave enough to resign after 5 years of being silenced. Your story made me realize I deserve better. Thank you for being courageous, so that we could be too. And in that moment, Addison understood she hadn't just left a company, she had broken free from an outdated ideology. She hadn't just changed jobs, she had changed how those around her saw their own value. One evening, while clearing out an old document box, Addison stumbled upon the first proposal she had ever submitted to Victoria, a meticulously prepared request for a raise complete with data graphs and analysis. She stared at it for a long while, then gently folded it and placed it into a folder labeled Where I Started, not as a reminder of disappointment, but as a quiet tribute to the journey. Because rising up is never a waste, even when it isn't recognized right away. The following Monday, she was invited to speak at an internal North Bay panel discussion titled Retaining Talent in the Modern Era. Addison didn't mention Harbor Point. She simply spoke about how organizations thrive when they value contribution and, more importantly, when they listen. At the end of her talk, she looked out across the room at all the attentive faces and said softly, I used to believe loyalty meant proving yourself through silence. But the truth is, loyalty doesn't mean accepting being overlooked. And leaving isn't always failure. Sometimes it's the bravest way to protect yourself. Applause filled the room, not because Addison had won anything, but because she had spoken for so many who never found the courage to speak up. And in her heart, only one thing remained crystal clear. She no longer needed to look back. Because the best thing Harbor Point ever did for her was push her toward the place she truly belonged. If you're reading this story and see a glimpse of yourself in Addison, someone who once gave their all, who waited patiently for recognition from places that never truly valued them, then please remember this. Your worth does not depend on whether others can see it. You don't have to beg for opportunities. You don't have to stay in places that make you feel small. Loyalty does not mean silent suffering. And walking away after giving everything and still being overlooked is not a failure. It's the first step toward reclaiming who you are. Sometimes all it takes to change your life is a single nod to the courage within your heart. Believe that you are worthy, and if this place can't see it, then somewhere else will. Somewhere out there, your light will never be forgotten. That's the end of this story. If you found it meaningful, please leave us a comment, like, share, or subscribe to support us in creating more content like this. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next time.